Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Jessica Ward King, the StigmaCrusher here. Today I want to give you a bit of a hot take. And I said to myself, I'm like, Jessica, why are you making this hard for yourself? But nonetheless, I want to talk about this. So the question is, how much of my bipolar is myself? And how much of it can I really separate from my personality and from myself? And there are really two schools of thought on this. There are the folks that think that their mental illness is very much separable from themselves, that there's themselves, their core self, their core personality, their core being, and their mental illness is completely separate from that, and that, one day there could be a bolt of lightning come down, separate themselves from their mental illness, and they would be still core themselves, and their mental illness would separate off. And then there are those folks that feel like their mental illness has been with them for so long that they're kind of entwined, that their personality is more entwined with their mental illness, and that they kind of, if that bolt of lightning hit them, maybe their mental illness could separate off, but that there would be pieces that would either be left behind or that would be missing somehow. If you've been here a while, maybe you can guess which one I am. I am the latter. My mental illness, my bipolar disorder, has been with me since I was about 15 years old. And I feel like it has been with me since I was forming as a tadpole. And I don't feel like there is any part of my being that has not been touched by my experience with my mental illness. And I honestly feel like if this was a Hallmark special and you went back and you had me, you went back to that moment when the bipolar came and you took it away and you had me develop without it, I would not be at the same place where I am today. And I don't think I'd be at a better place or a worse place. And this Hallmark special wouldn't, come out to some sappy ending where I found out that I was, some better person or worse person or anything like that. It would just be a different place. But I really feel like it came at such a time where it's really entwined with the person that I grew up to become, and that I developed to be, and that I have grown into, the woman that I have grown into. And I feel like with bipolar particularly, that is often the case because it does often show up in late adolescence, early adulthood, when the person is still forming. So the brain does not fully form until around 25 years old. The personage, the actual personality, doesn't stop forming until, in our culture, later adulthood, even until you start adulting, right? And like 30 years old or so. And even past then, we continue to evolve and adapt. And so I find that with bipolar disorder particularly, and with any mental illness that kind of shows up in the teenage years, that can be true, where it shows up at a time when you're still forming, you're at such a formative stage that it starts to become a part of you so early, and it can really start to inform the way that you develop and the way that you see yourself and the way that you start to think of yourself. And so for me, that's the way that I've started to think of myself and my mental illness and the way that they interact. And now, does that mean that I am my mental illness? No, certainly not. And if they could cure my mental illness one day, does that mean that I would, that I would not take the cure and that I would remain mentally ill for the rest of my being because I see myself as intertwined? That's a complex question. The answer, I think, ultimately is no, because I struggle very, very mightily with my illness, and I suffer quite a lot from it. And so I wouldn't want that suffering to continue. And I do get periods where I'm well and where I see those symptoms fall away, and I see myself as a person that is not living with the symptoms of my mental illness. And so I get to kind of glimpse what it might look like if I weren't living with that mental illness, if I weren't living with those symptoms. And it's almost like seeing myself kind of without the mental illness and without that part. And but at the same time, even during those periods of time, I'm still informed by my experience of mental illness. I'm still a person with lived experience of mental illness. I'm still informed by the threat of mental illness hanging over me, the knowledge that I will have another episode. When is it going to come? When is it going to hit me again? I have to prepare for it. I have to be ready. I have to take care of myself in certain ways. I have to, not drink or go to bed at certain times, or not party too hard, or eat in certain ways, take care of myself in certain ways. So I'm still living as if I have a mental illness, even when I am in periods of wellness. And so my mental illness still informs the way that I live at all times, even when I'm not symptomatic. And it still informs the way that, I'm still the StigmaCrusher, even when I'm not symptomatic. It still informs the way that I'm thinking. It still informs the research that I do. It still informs the advocacy work that I do. And so I really live through my mental illness. It's something, with this advocacy work that I do, with the talks that I give, with the work that I do, even at work, I work on mental health and mental illness. I really have embraced my journey with mental health and mental illness as something that I can leverage for the betterment of myself and for other people. And so I live through it. And that's partly why I really, I feel as though my mental illness is a part of me, because I have embraced it, and I take it as really something almost to be, I guess, not proud of, but something not to be ashamed of. And there's a slight difference there, right? It's not something that I'm like, hey guys, I have mental illness, woohoo, yeehaw, because it's not something that I'm like super happy about. It's again something that I would like to see there be a cure to. I would like to see gone from my life if it could be possible. But it's something that I'm not unproud of. If you can see the distinction there, I'm not afraid to tell people. I'm in fact quite happy to tell people about it and to crush stigma in my daily life. And so in that way, I just see it as a part and parcel of my life and part and parcel of my personality. And so that is a bit of a hot take, because there are a lot of people that would say, it's not part of your personality. It's not part of who you are. It's an illness. It's something separate. It's something to be cured and something to be worked on. And I just don't see it that way for me. And it's not something for me that's absolute either. Like for me, it's that way. I can see for other people it being a different way. And even for people that live with different disorders, like for example, schizophrenia or other psychosis related disorders, they come on in the early, or sometimes, particularly for women, late 20s, or even later in life. By that time, people often already have established lives. They've been to school. They've maybe got jobs, and they've got an identity. They've got a direction. They've got a way to go. And then their illness hits them, and they feel like they've been hit by a ton of bricks, where they had a life, they had a personality, they were just fine, thank you. And then they got hit by this illness, and they very much feel like it's an other. It's a separate. And that's an absolutely valid experience that is completely foreign to me, where mine hit when I was 15. Theirs is a completely different experience that I would totally get. Same with, for example, something like PTSD, where that experience can hit at any time in your life. So let's say somebody that's had a traumatic experience when they're, 50, and all of a sudden this mental illness strikes them, and they were like, I was doing just fine with my life and my personality before this, and now this hits. They may not see their mental illness as part and parcel of their personality, and I get that. So mental illness is not all one thing, right? It is very diverse. We talk about mental illness as though it is one thing. I talk about mental illness as though it is one thing because our culture does, and that is a way that we talk, and so I do it. But it is very much not one thing, right? And so there are very much different experiences of mental illness, different experiences of bipolar disorder as well. People have different views on that. I'm not even saying everybody with bipolar has the same experience. This is just my take on my experience with my bipolar. And it's kind of interesting because my if you've been around a while, you know I have chronic migraines as well. I deal with them almost every single day. And they've been around literally as long as the bipolar. They cropped up at exactly the same time. And I don't see my migraines as part of my personality. And I think the difference there for me is that the bipolar affects the way that I think, the way that I feel. It affects the way that my personality works, the way that I am as a human, as a person. My migraines, they affect my brain similarly to my bipolar, right? Both affect my brain, but my migraines don't affect the way that I think and feel the same way that my bipolar does. My migraines just, affect the pain in my head. They affect like sometimes the way that I sense, like the way that I hear things, that things can be too loud, the way that I see things can be too bright. Sometimes I see aura, or sometimes I can get nauseous or vomit. Those kinds of things all come with migraines, but they don't affect the way that I think and the way that I feel and the way that I process information and those kinds of things. Bipolar does. And that's why I think there's a difference between mental illness and other physical illnesses that might be chronic, that physical illnesses don't necessarily affect or get integrated with one's sense of self in the same way that mental illnesses can or do. And that can be a problem because it actually does affect stigma. People do tend to, and this, you may be like judging me for this, but people do, it can affect stigma because people do tend to think that mental illnesses are a person because they do affect the way that they think and feel. And so, because some people do think that mental illnesses literally they are the personality and they are the sum total of a person. And so a person with psychosis, for example, is everything that they are is psychosis. There's really nothing else to them. They are, disorganized thought. They are hallucinations and delusions. They are all of those stereotypes that we hear about psychosis. They are potentially dangerous. They are all of these things. And that's all that they are. They're nothing else. They're not mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers and people that have gone to school and have interests and work and do all kinds of things. They're not any of those things. They just are their illness. And so when I say that I feel like my bipolar is part of me, could that feed into the stigma where people say, well, you are your bipolar? Well, I'm not. I just feel like it's integrated into me, and it's not the same as me. If that lightning bolt came down, it could be parted from me, and I would like it to be one day. But I do feel like it would still somehow be a part of me, where I would still have that experience left in me of being a person with lived experience. It wouldn't be like, see ya. Whereas if the migraines were parted from me, I'd be like, done. I'm no longer a person with lived experience of migraine. Like they are gone. I am good. I don't need to think about those anymore. They're done. Out of here. Goodbye. Whereas I would feel more strongly about continuing to think about and ponder and talk about my lived experience and living experience of bipolar disorder as a feature of my life. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm hoping that makes sense. It's just something that actually affects the way that I think about myself more than my other physical illness, chronic illness, which is my migraine, if that makes any sense. It affects the way that I see myself, I guess. And as I say, others feel differently. It doesn't affect the way they see themselves, and that's totally fine. I'd love to hear from you if it affects the way you see yourself, your mental illness, if you have one, of course, affects the way that you see yourself. If you see your personality differently because of your mental illness, if you think it affects, the way that you see yourself, the way that you conceptualize who you are, whether you would like to see it gone, or whether you would miss it in some way, in a perverse way perhaps, but in some way nonetheless. So do let me know down below. I would really love to hear your thoughts on this, because it could be a hot take. Please don't at me. Don't get mad at me, but keep comments nice and civil, and I'd love to hear your comments. So take care of yourselves this week. You may not see me next week. I am on holidays for a week, and I will try to get in front of the camera, but it may not happen. So don't look for me. But if you see me posting, then you'll know I'm here. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.
StigmaCrusher.